It's time for fights. Straw Hats against Officer Agents, 2v2s and 1v1s. We're getting to the most action-packed portion of the arc with some of One Piece's most iconic early fights. But a good fight is more than just good action. It needs to tell a story. It needs to tell us something about the characters. So let's see how Oda succeeds as he lets each of the Straw Hats have a moment to shine during the Grandeur of Alabasta. It's moments before the clash in Alabasta's capital, the royal army on one side, the fast-approaching rebels on the other, and unbeknownst to those two groups are two more opposing forces, the Straw Hats and Vivi, and the Baroque Works officer agents determined to stop them. So, in order to get to our officer agent showdowns, we need to split everyone up, and Oda does that very naturally. Vivi needs to get to the rebels before the fighting begins, and they know Baroque Works will try and stop them. So, what do? With assistance from the supersonic duck squadron, all 6 of them wear cloaks and split up to enter the royal capital via different entrances, drawing in the officer agents with them. Their job is to stop Vivi, and because they don't know which rider is her, the officer agents have to split up to pursue all the different pairings. But Vivi isn't with them. She has stayed behind, relying on her friends to take the risk of drawing the officer agents. She has fully accepted the fact that she doesn't have to do this alone. So we get this excellent page of all the Straw Hats revealing themselves, along with Eyelashes the Camel, who has his own camel sound effect, which is hilarious. Absolutely quality page. So now the fights are decided. Usopp and Eyelashes against Mr. Tubon Clay, Zoro and Nami against Mr. 1 and Miss Doublefinger, and Chopper and Sanji against Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas. And Vivi off to stop the rebels. The ground trembles as literally millions of people charge towards the city, and Vivi is there, ready to intercept them, and of course loyal Karoo is standing right beside her. As Vivi shouts out to the rebels, it seems as if Koza has noticed her, but as we found out last time, the house always wins. Crocodile had a contingency. There's a Baroque Works agent within the royal army, and they fired off a shot to kick up a cloud of dust that hides Vivi from Koza. And poor Vivi, the absolute look of despair on her face as she turns around, the desperation as she shouts out, trying to stop the war. But Crocodile's plan has taken away Vivi's voice. Drowned out by the cries of battle, she gets knocked down by the charging rebels, and as Karoo rushes towards her, the war truly begins. Karoo really loves Vivi. He's been with her ever since she was a little girl, he's willing to die to protect her, and he proves it again here, shielding Vivi from the stampede. But even though the fighting has started, Vivi has learned one thing during her time with the crew. It is that even if things appear hopeless, you never give up. An obviously fake Usopp appears, made even more obvious by cutting away to the result of the first off-screen round of fights with Eyelashes and the real Usopp getting absolutely trounced. Thankfully, Mr. 2 didn't kill Usopp. Perhaps he still considers them friends? Either way, Sanji is on the scene, brought there by members of the Duck Squadron, which means Chopper is currently alone. But we go back to Vivi as fake Usopp callously calls Karoo that bird, which Usopp would never call Karoo after their battle in Little Garden. As Vivi confirms his identity as a phony, beaten and battered Karoo leaps back into action, whisking Vivi away as Mr. 2 swan dashes after them. Despite Vivi's protestations, Karoo is too injured. She'll get off and fight Mr. 2. Karoo proves himself again and again. His love for Vivi, his desire to protect her, allows Karoo to do the impossible. Despite his current state, he scales the sheer cliffs surrounding Alabasta and then flies the last few steps. Mr. 2 is nothing if not persistent though, so he manages to chase after them. As Vivi and Karoo make it into the battleground that Alabasta has now become, there's this moment as someone falls, presumably dead in front of Vivi, but she grits her teeth. She must minimize those killed by Crocodile's plan, and she relies on Karoo to make it through the battle in front of her. She must make it to Chukka and stop the royal army if she wants to stop the war. Karoo manages to power through despite getting shot. He is determined to protect Vivi, and only once out of the chaos of battle does Karoo finally collapse, completely spent. Even still, he urges Vivi to continue on without him, to hurry and go. I think it's really impressive that you can tell exactly what Karoo is saying in this moment. As Mr. 2 closes in, Karoo cries out. he has friends of his own, and 2 members of the squadron intercept Mr. 2. More importantly, as is proven before, when Vivi's in trouble, she can count on Sanji. As he compliments Karoo and urges Vivi onwards, Sanji then confronts Mr. 2, who assumes he's the famous Mr. Prince. But no. As Sanji's disguise falls to the ground, he fights not as a prince, but who he really is, Sanji, sea cook, and pirate. Usopp has, in the meanwhile, made his way to Chopper, and we reconfirm our fights. Sanji against Mr. 2 Bon Clay, and Usopp and Chopper against Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas. As Chopper tries to get Usopp up to speed, Usopp only gets further confused by what, frankly, sounds like gibberish. A human mole Zoan, a cleanup hitter, and a dog? Then a baseball, one seen earlier, appears in front of Usopp and promptly explodes. Now the fighting can really begin. And our first round is Usopp and Chopper versus Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas. Oda starts off this fight by introducing the opponents, getting us up to speed with what Chopper and Usopp have to overcome, and he starts with the newest and most unique concept of this fight. Lasso, not a dog, but a gun that has somehow eaten a dog devil fruit. As Miss Merry Christmas helpfully explains, the latest tech on the Grand Line allows inanimate objects to eat devil fruits. Let's chew on that for a second. An inanimate object gained sentience from eating a devil fruit. It's gained personality. It isn't some strange, technically alive, dog-like meat and gun infusion. It has fully gained dog-like qualities. It likes getting pats, it's learned how to shake, its tail is wagging. Which brings us to 2 possibilities. Either guns, like swords, have some degree of will, and being turned into a dog just happened to allow the gun to express itself, or devil fruits themselves, at least Zoan ones that turn people, and now objects, into animals, are themselves imbued with a will of their own. Usopp says devil fruits don't have minds of their own, but we've already learned Usopp lies can come true, so let's throw that into the chest. Lasso aside, Oda also introduces the capabilities of Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas, and what Usopp and Chopper must overcome in this fight. Mr. 4 is strong and an incredibly skilled batter, and Miss Merry Christmas can go underground and create tunnels. Together, along with Lasso, they can seemingly appear and launch attacks from anywhere. Their coordination makes them a difficult combo to deal with. Chopper and Usopp will have to overcome their teamwork, although their own teamwork is sorely lacking. So where does Oda take this premise? I mean, he's already introduced a new concept that validates the fight just by itself, but is not content to stop there. First, he gives us some excellent Usopp service, as Usopp uses the mole tunnels to his advantage to land a blow against Mr. 4 with his 5-ton hammer. This is the coolest Usopp has ever looked in a fight, which means it's obvious that none of it is true. This is one of Usopp's strengths though. His bluff has temporarily stunned Mr. 4 and gotten Miss Merry Christmas on the defensive. He's certainly impressed Chopper, and Usopp milks his praise as much as he can, until Mr. 4 comes too. Usopp can't win this fight on lies alone. The fight swings back into Baroque Works' favor as they relentlessly attack the pair, and Chopper this time desperately tries to find a weak point in his foe's strategy. As Usopp suffers a strong blow, it's Chopper's time to strike as he uses Lasso's cold against them and fires a large amount of explosive baseballs into the tunnels which he has surmised are all connected. Once again, we get a great explosive panel that appears to be a final blow, but though they've received some damage, Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas are still standing. And check out this panel of Mr. 4 emerging like a demon from the smoke. This fight has a comedic bent to it, but let's get something straight. These two are monstrous. Usopp at this point has had enough, and disappointingly decides to flee. He's already lost once today, Vivi's already made it inside the capital. What's the point in continuing to fight these two? Aside from lying, running is the only other thing Usopp is good at. But that also doesn't work here. Miss Merry Christmas catches Usopp and then uses Usopp's cowardice to mock Luffy, breaking the news to Usopp and Chopper that Crocodile has finished Luffy, which, to his knowledge, he has. Though her mocking has the opposite effect on Usopp, as he has a third thing he's good at: standing up for those he cares about. Usopp may not have any faith in himself, but if there's one person he believes in, it's Luffy. Usopp has been exaggerating to Chopper since they've arrived in Alabasta, but it's here that Usopp decides to impart some real knowledge to his new crewmate. Even as he gets dragged along by Miss Merry Christmas through a wall and absolutely decimated by a Mr. 4-ton bat to the face, he doesn't stop his speech. There comes a time when a man, even when he's up against an enemy he's scared to death of, even if there's no chance of winning, there comes a time when a man's gotta fight. And that's when somebody makes fun of their friend's dream. This is Usopp at his best, beaten, broken, but resolute in what he believes. Chopper gets inspired and takes up a new, more monstrous transformation than he's ever taken before. He used to hate being called a monster, but for his new family, he'll look as monstrous as he has to. And the two are finally able to win, not by individually using their own abilities, but by working together. Their combination showing that a normal, unimpressive hammer can overcome the strength of a 4-ton bat. First round goes to Chopper and Usopp. We get a brief intermission as we see the current state of the battle, Koza breaking off from the rebels to try and get Cobra to surrender to stop the fighting and bloodshed, while Vivi makes contact with the Royal Army and requests to be taken to Chaka. Then, with a kick to the face, we begin round 2, Mr. 2, Bon Clay versus Sanji. It starts with the two being quite even, deftly exchanging blows with one another and both surprised at one another's skills, but Oda isn't content with a normal fight here either. Oda's strength isn't in depicting normal fights, so Bon Clay starts incorporating his devil fruit, first with the intention of crippling Sanji with laughter by mix and matching all the weirdest facial features he has in his memory, resulting in a great gag page where everything has stayed exactly the same aside from the inclusion of Usopp's nose. This, of course, doesn't deter Sanji in the slightest. So Bon Clay tries his second tactic. Surely Sanji would never dare harm one of his friends. This also has no effect, as Sanji heroically declares that it's what's on the inside that counts. That is, until Bon Clay transforms into Nami, leaving Sanji a love-struck fool. So it appears as though Oda has transformed this fight from just a clash of strength, but a unique struggle for Sanji to overcome. Oda cuts away back to Vivi meeting with Chaka, and echoing her father's words, she tells him that the people currently waging war against one another are Alabasta. The people are the kingdom. And so she entreats Chaka to destroy the palace, who, upon recalling King Cobra's words, agrees. This brief interlude, aside from moving the state of the overall conflict forward, also serves to spare us from watching the beating that Sanji has taken, as we cut back to see Bon Clay, still assuming Nami's form, grinding a ballet slipper onto Sanji's head. Sanji knows intellectually that this is not Nami, but when he looks at her, he just can't help himself. Sanji endures more blows, some more comedic than others. Bon Clay chops Sanji's cartoonish heart eye, something I never actually noticed before, and Sanji in turn just can't land a blow, until he notices something, and he counters Bon Clay's finishing twirling kick. Bon Clay can't attack while assuming another person's form, so Sanji just has to aim for those opportunities. Cue another great panel of Bon Clay reacting to being found out. Bon Clay then puts on his swan shoes and continues the attack. More blows are exchanged, Bon Clay attempting to pull the change into Nami trick again, but Sanji outplays him, getting him to touch his cheek and undo the transformation. More vicious blows, a lovely clashing kicks panel, and a delayed impact later, and Sanji barely gets the win, though admitting that Bon Clay transforming into Nami once more may have turned the tables. Despite their grueling battle, Sanji appears to respect Bon Clay, though not enough to not give him a final kick to get Usopp's sniper goggles back. As the end card states, round 2's fight winner is Sanji, and there is a dubious friendship as a reward. All that said, and I hate to say this, but I think this is probably the weakest fight of the lot. It's flashy, it's funny, but there's a reason I spent less than half as much time covering it. I couldn't identify an underlying story to the fight. Chopper and Usopp's fight has an overarching story of the two first failing to defeat the officer agents by their own abilities and only succeeding once the two work together. The obstacle, the officer agents' teamwork, that they must overcome is only overcome with their own teamwork. It's also Chopper's first time fighting as part of a team, as his only previous real fight was a one-on-one with something Marimo. Sprinkled in with the overarching teamwork narrative is personal growth. Usopp flees when he thinks he's at risk, but when Luffy's dream gets mocked, he fights his cowardly nature to stand up for his friend's dream. Chopper, who has previously hated being called a monster, turns into his most monstrous form yet in order to defeat the pair. Sanji's fight with Bon Clay, it's more of a straight-up brawl between two highly competent and evenly matched fighters. Though, as I mentioned, it looks like Oda introduces a unique obstacle that Sanji will struggle to overcome going against Bon Clay when he's assumed Nami's form, but Sanji doesn't overcome that. Rather, he finds the weakness in Bon Clay's ability. He works around it. Sanji, save for a few broken bones, is the same at the end of the fight as he is at the start of it, a dubious friendship with Bon Clay notwithstanding. Maybe I'm missing something. Sanji dropping the alias of Mr. Prince to become Seacook Sanji against a face-changing villain? But that doesn't really factor into the rest of the fight, Sanji's persona as Mr. Prince, I mean. Maybe it's the growth that Sanji was able to keep a cool head for that brief moment Bon Clay transformed into Nami so he could trick him into changing back? I really don't know. Let me know in the comments if you've picked up something I didn't in this fight. Cool action can justify itself, and there is a lot of that, but compared to the other fights, especially the two coming up, it just felt a bit lacking. But before we get into those two fights, we have another in-between fight intermission to see what Vivi is up to. She's ready to blow up the palace, worrying about her friends but keeping faith that Luffy is alright since she's still planning to feed Luffy until he explodes. However, Crocodile appears. He was planning to commandeer this palace once the kingdom is overthrown, so he can't allow Vivi to destroy it. Intermission over, back to the fighting, and we see what Zoro and Nami have been doing all this time. Nami has been running for her life while Zoro fails to find her. Even when she's right there, he takes a shortcut in a completely different direction. Nami is working up the resolve to fight, but whenever she looks at Mr. One and Miss Doublefinger, no, these two are professionals. Nami is too smart to try and take the both of them on. As Mr. One lunges forward to take Nami out, Zoro thankfully appears to intercept. Zoro feels the responsibility to protect his crewmates, and his lack of direction notwithstanding, he succeeds. As Mr. One shows off his dice fruit, Oda fleshes out Zoro's prior interaction with Baroque Works, and Zoro goads Mr. One into a one-on-one. Their fight is later though. All that was to establish now that this 2v2 turns into two 1v1s, which means the next fight is Miss Doublefinger versus Nami. This fight starts off strong with no fighting at all. Oda sets the theme of the fight very clearly from the beginning. Nami isn't much of a fighter. She's competent enough to look after herself, but she's the type to avoid conflict if she can. She hasn't had a serious battle this whole series that wasn't against the villain's nameless crew, and even in those fights, she couldn't do much. Nami isn't the prideful sort. We've seen that since she's entered the Grand Line. She freely admitted that her navigation skills honed on the East Blue Seas were useless, and so she strove to improve. Here, it's much the same. She knows and admits that she's not strong enough to take an enemy on by herself, and asks Usopp to help her by crafting some sort of weapon for her to use. In that flashback, and as she stares at the climate baton in her hands, she thinks of Vivi. She wants to help her. Before, it may have been because she resonated with Vivi's plight, but now they're close. Vivi delayed her arrival in Alabasta for Nami's sake, putting her people at risk. Nami wants to be for Vivi what the crew were for her against Arlong. So Oda sets up three things this fight is going to be about. Number 1, Nami's new weapon. Number 2, Nami being able to hold her own in a fight. And number 3, Nami fighting for Vivi's sake. And what is Nami up against? Well, as Miss Doublefinger pierces through a wall and through Nami's shoulders, she reveals the spike fruit, something that allows her to produce spikes from her body. As an enemy, Miss Doublefinger doesn't really complement any of the fight's overall goals, but she serves as a good representative of Baroque Works. She's the second highest ranked woman in the organization behind Miss All Sunday, and her devil fruit is simple yet destructive. Miss Doublefinger is also shown to be relatively good-natured in comparison to the other officer agents aside from Bon Clay, which is good news for Nami as when she tries out the climate baton for the first time, an extraordinary weapon that can summon clouds, make it rain, and stir up wind, she manages to manifest doves and streamers from nothing. Truly, Usopp has produced something incredible. Visual gag aside, the climate baton is not operating as Nami expects, and thankfully Miss Doublefinger's personality means that she is willing to suffer the second-hand embarrassment of watching Nami fail without immediately trying to go for the kill, as her more business-oriented partner likely would. So the first struggle Nami has to overcome in regards to her new weapon is as such: figuring out how it works. She is literally reading the instructions as she's fighting. Not the correct instructions though, as we get another gag and more secondhand embarrassment from Miss Doublefinger, who does decide to go on the attack. Nami tries another move, but it proves ineffective, and Nami in return gets another wound. Oda shows off some of the capabilities of the spike fruit as Miss Doublefinger turns her whole body into spikes and intends to take Nami down. But Nami's strength is in her brains, and she manages to redirect the attack safely with her cloak. Now, with a brief moment of respite, Nami discovers she was reading the party trick instructions, resulting in this excellent Nami reaction face. That aside, she now confronts Miss Doublefinger, tearing her clothes to make them more maneuverable, and even shedding some excess jewelry. It's a nice subtle detail. Nami isn't the type to throw away valuables, but she's fighting for Vivi now. She doesn't need the treasure. Miss Doublefinger patiently stands by as Nami demonstrates the basic functionality of the parts of the climate baton: the heat ball, cool ball, and thunder ball, and then goes on the attack once again, injuring Nami yet again. But this time, Nami strikes back with a cyclone tempo, which actually manages to blow Miss Doublefinger away. Nami explains it as the cold and hot air interacting to produce wind, but most importantly, Usopp didn't realize how it works. We get a hint that there is an ultimate one-time move available called the Tornado Tempo, but as it looks like Nami's being pierced through by Miss Doublefinger, we start to see what will really get Nami the win: her intelligence and her weather knowledge. Though not something Usopp intended, Nami was able to use the tools available to her to recreate a weather phenomenon, a mirage from a light refraction. The climate baton isn't something like a sword or a club. It doesn't rely on strength. It is a tool that allows Nami to fight intelligently. This fight is not a fight of raw power versus raw power. This is the moment Oda begins to demonstrate his second item for the confrontation: the fact that Nami can now hold her own in a fight with her intelligence. At that revelation, we get yet another intermission. Sanji meets back up with Usopp and Chopper, and we see that Alabasta's royal army is trapped outside the palace, with Miss All-Sunday using her ability to keep them away from the main gate. Inside the gate is Chaka and Vivi, face to face with Crocodile and Miss All-Sunday, who have brought along Cobra, who is literally and painfully pinned to a wall. Crocodile tells Vivi that Luffy is dead, which she, as someone who has placed her trust in Luffy, viciously denies, and also makes it clear that he's definitely planning on killing Vivi and Cobra, even if the kingdom falls and there's no real need for him to do so. But, most importantly, when Crocodile turns to Cobra, we learn about the thing that Crocodile believes is an Alabasta, the item that will grant him military might, his true goal this entire time, as he asks, "Where is the Pluton?" And Cobra's eyes narrow in shock and fear. Back to Nami, who, despite having figured out how to use the climate baton, is now trapped up against a wall, and geez, this panel just looks funny to me. She escapes and starts formulating her plan, using her climate knowledge to produce the conditions she needs for victory. Miss Doublefinger isn't just going to let her set up though, and continues to fire off these devastatingly destructive attacks. And hold on, this is an interesting moment here. Miss Doublefinger's spike acupuncture. To my mind, this is the first time we've seen someone use the abilities of their devil fruit to enhance their physical attributes beyond the scope of their fruit's power. The spike fruit isn't a fruit that gives you the ability to turn super buff. Rather, Miss Doublefinger has used what her fruit allows her to do things that it doesn't allow you to do. An interesting application of devil fruit abilities, and one I'll throw in the chest. Whilst dodging all of Miss Doublefinger's abilities, we see what Nami has been aiming for: creating a cloud. And Nami strives to make it grow, and she succeeds in spite of Miss Doublefinger landing yet another blow. All through her own ingenuity, Nami succeeds in striking Miss Doublefinger with a self-made thunderbolt. But Nami isn't underestimating her opponent as she fakes out Miss Doublefinger a second time with another mirage. Now it's time for final blows. Nami has readied her tornado tempo, and Miss Doublefinger charges forward with another destructive sea urchin stinger. Nami cannot miss this shot, and she is surprised that Miss Doublefinger hasn't been stunned by the thunderbolt, so rather than dodging this wall-shredding attack, Nami takes it head-on. Her foot is completely pierced through, but it's in the finale of the battle that Oda brings us back to his third item for this confrontation. Nami is fighting for Vivi's sake. Nami knows the pain Vivi has been suffering, seeing the land she loves and the people she cares for be destroyed by Crocodile's plan, just as Nami saw her island and village suffer under Arlong. This physical pain Nami feels is nothing compared to that, and she's determined to rescue Vivi from it. So Nami launches her tornado tempo point blank with full trust in the weapon that Usopp gave her, and despite a fake out, it launches Miss Doublefinger through a wall, delivering Nami her first one-on-one victory of the series. Her intelligence and determination has overpowered the raw strength of one of Baroque Works' hardest hitters. And I love her celebration panels, the stunned look on her face, how small Nami is in the frame, her genuine, almost embarrassing victory cheer. I can't put my finger on why I like it so much, a fight away from the action in the deserted back streets, the way Oda makes it look like a small, unimportant moment, but to Nami this victory is proof that she can fight on behalf of those she cares about. Round 3 goes to Nami. Though, another fight means another intermission, starting off with Crocodile describing Pluton, an ancient weapon that can vaporize islands. Put that in the chest. Crocodile needs this ultimate weapon to keep the world government at bay as he increases his political power to create his own kingdom that surpasses the world government. While it's unknown how he knew that Cobra knew about Pluton, this is Crocodile's ultimate goal, and why he targeted Alabasta specifically. Crocodile then does even more stake raising, explaining that in 30 minutes he will be blowing up the palace square with the intention of wiping out the royal and rebel forces in a single shot, removing the fighting power of anyone that could possibly oppose him in the kingdom. While continued fighting would result in more casualties, this threat puts a more definitive time pressure on stopping Crocodile. The final thing Crocodile introduces is the Poneglyph, which according to Vivi is that record of history, and King Cobra says he'll take Crocodile to it. This intermission really fleshes out why Oda has been bringing us further and further into the past during this saga, with Crocodile's goal being an ancient weapon, the location of which should be revealed via a record of history. As Chaka looks like he's about to intervene, we leave the intermission to get to our final fight, Zoro versus Mr. One. In contrast to Nami's multifaceted fight with multiple touchpoints, Zoro's fight has one very clearly defined goal, a goal that Zoro has been lamenting for much of this saga. He couldn't cut the candelabra, he couldn't destroy the cage, and now he can't cut this Dice man whose sharp flesh is as strong as sword metal. Zoro knows that in his current state, he cannot win. Though, difficult problems often require simple solutions. Zoro can't win because he can't cut steel? Easy. He'll just have to figure out how to cut steel over the course of this battle. It's his regret of the saga, the struggle he must overcome, the strength of his opponent, and a matter of personal growth. It's really Oda's most well-realized single-focus fight so far in the series. But there is a key thing to note about how Zoro thinks he'll be able to succeed. He'll take it up a notch in strength. Is strength really the answer? I guess we'll find out. The fight starts off flashy with many action-packed panels illustrating something important. Zoro appears stronger in a technical sense than Mr. One. While Zoro can't slice him to ribbons, he can knock him down, overpowering him in terms of raw strength, or at least that's how I interpret it. We've seen Zoro being stupid strong, so how much stronger does he think he needs to be to cut steel? Mr. One's destructive ability is nothing to sneeze at though, as he slices up a building and launches Zoro at it to reduce the remains to rubble. In this moment, as Zoro appears to be buried, he begins to second-guess himself. He's pushed himself further than anyone else, so what is it that he's really lacking? He reminisces about his training, a time when a younger him asked his teacher about people being able to cut steel, and his teacher, in response, fails to cut a sheet of paper. There's a lesson in this though. There are swordsmen who are able to not cut anything, and yet are also able to cut steel. It isn't a case that a sword is purely meant for destruction. Swordsmanship means you are able to cut with intention. If a sword cuts everything, it's no more than a blade. Zoro, though he didn't understand at the time, should have an inkling to this. After all, Zoro called the Kitetsu 3 a problem child because it cut when he didn't want it to. An inkling isn't enough though, and Zoro and Mr. One exchange even more blows, fighting evenly until Mr. One brings out his buzzsaw technique, landing some absolutely brutal and bloody blows on Zoro. Zoro is barely still alive, and Mr. One closes in to finish the job, and there's this great moment, a callback to Zoro's fight with Mihawk. Zoro isn't just someone who uses a sword, he is a swordsman, and wounds on the back are a swordsman's shame, even if he's temporarily lost his swords. So Zoro makes sure to take Mr. One's blow from the front, and a building collapses on top of him. Mr. One walks away thinking he's won, but he stops and turns to see Zoro standing. As Zoro has his revelation about what his teacher meant, we don't see his eyes. This isn't something Zoro can see, it isn't a case of hearing, everything is eerily silent, but it's a feeling that allows him to sense the world around him, the rubble, the rocks, the trees, the earth itself. It's only after Zoro makes the link to what his teacher said that we see his eyes, when he sets them on Mr. One, thinking that he can hear the breathing of Mr. One's steel. Into the chest it goes. Zoro fails to cut a branch, then cleanly splits a boulder, then turns his sword to Mr. One. It's only Zoro and Kuina's sword, no more defense, just one attack. An attack he wasn't strong enough to make this whole saga, but he makes it now. So Zoro gives Mr. One his thanks as he cuts him down. He is now stronger. Mr. One teases Zoro, asking if he'll cut Diamond next, but then falls with a begrudging smile on his face. The winner of the fourth and final round is Zoro. It's really sweet and true to his character that his first thought after his fight is the safety of the crew. That's always a priority for Zoro, even when he's beaten and bloodied. And as this long series of fights come to a close, we catch up with the rest of the crew. Chopper, Sanji and Usopp and Eyelashes are running to the palace as Usopp fears the worst about Luffy, though Sanji doesn't believe it for a second. Nami untangles the Tornado Tempo aftermath and also heads towards the palace. Meanwhile, Zoro is unconscious on the floor. And Luffy is still nowhere to be seen, but he said he'd meet them at Alabasta, and so his crew trust in him. The battle is raging on, and though the crew have won all their individual battles, this conflict won't end until Crocodile is defeated. But that will have to wait until next time. There was another intermission after Zoro's final blow against Mr. One, but I skipped it because it awkwardly interrupts Zoro's fight, and I'll cover it next part instead. Though, honestly, I think I really appreciate the structure of the fights here, especially when compared to some of the later ones in the series that get a bit more messy, let's say. It's very cleanly just whichever Straw Hat crewmate battle is happening, dispersed pretty evenly with whatever is happening on Vivi's end. It's showing the overall state of the battle for Alabasta, while giving each crew member a time to shine. Each fight is only 3 or so chapters long as well, and aside from Zoro's brief clash with Mr. One to explain how he and Nami get separated, each stays focused on the current fight instead of jumping between them, which I can imagine made things much easier for weekly readers. If you know what I'm getting at, then you know. Despite what I said about Sanji's clash lacking an underlying thing to keep it cohesive, I do enjoy all of these fights, and they're iconic for a reason. And I guess that's all I have to say. Next time we reach the climax of this war, it's getting so close to the end of this series I can barely believe it. Just 2 more parts left. Thank you all for your support and encouragement because, as always, it's not I attempt new things, it's we attempt new things. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a fruitful day.